Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Passion Institute podcast. Today's topic is AI is not going to replace people. AI is going to replace people that are not prepared to use AI. And I want to dive into this in terms of what does that actually mean? What does that look like? And always practically, how do we actually make that work? I'm Shivani Gupta, I'm your host. And I want to kind of look at this statement, this provocative statement of the fact that AI won't replace your people, but it's the people using AI will replace the people who don't use AI. And it sounds like that everybody should be on it, but not everybody is. So we know that there's a fast moving era, that each day we are exponentially getting faster around AI and automation. We know that the competitive edge in our businesses is going to be who's got the tools and, more importantly, who knows how to use those tools. So in this particular episode, I want to look at some of the research and the global trends that are happening around the AI adoption. I want to explore some practical ways to be able to upskill your team so that they become more AI empowered and not just people that are bypassing AI and that hoping that this is the next thing that's going to be here and then disappear. It's not. It is absolutely here to stay. And the people that are not working on it the gap is going to continue to widen. And what do you do if you've got a staff member that is resisting learning AI? What do we actually do as leaders around that? And just talk a little bit about some of the growing trends, what some of the countries are doing, etc., around that. Now, I want to talk a bit firstly, about some of the research. The research from MIT talks about the narrative that robots are going to take our jobs. It's really misleading. You know, the idea is, and the key here is that it's the human machine complementary. It's about humans plus AI, not one or the other. Humans by themselves without AI, it's not going to work. AI without humans, it's not going to work. There's also been another really great academic paper called Artificial Intelligence and Team Dynamics. And this is where you look at when organizations are deploying EO and AI, as well as the biggest risk that is necessary in terms of what's happening for the jobs and what's going to happen to the people that don't integrate with AI workflows or the tools as well. And the other data that I wanted to share is that the global survey indicates that China, for example, is about 50%, 58% in terms of leading in terms of the AI adoption rates, and India is not far behind at 57%. So that's kind of the national AI adoption rate. So the implication about this, will AI replace all people, is not really right. It's about what can we use from AI effectively and then apply that into our businesses. And really, who can we become when we've got the preferred version of our staff that can really incorporate AI into what they do as well. And so what we need to do is we want to ideally as leaders have staff that can amplify their output. We don't want to replace them, but we want them to amplify their output with AI. And that's the really important part. The next thing I want to talk about is what does it actually mean for your business? Because as leaders, it's pretty important for leaders and entrepreneurs to be able to make sure that your people are trained in AI. And that becomes part of your talent strategy. And if you don't do it, you've got the risk of the fact that there'll be some team members who are going to become less productive over time. That gap is going to widen. People are going to have, a bunch of issues within the teams, but also for leaders. And how do you then reward and remunerate the people that have got far outweigh their output, which is what we've been talking about for more than a decade. We've wanted our people to have more output and let it be more output based rather than whether working from home or in the office. And now all of a sudden the people with AI are going to have greater output. So for example, the shifts to be able to implement some of that is, we're going to assess the tools later. And yes, there's so many tools coming, to the fact that, look, our teams are going to be using AI pretty tools consistently and learning some of that as part of your work. The other thing is, really helping people understand that the jobs are no longer going to be fixed, not that they ever were, but at the moment they're going to be very unfixed, if I can use that word. So the job roles are going to evolve significantly. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to amplify and multiply the amount of work that we do. And we really need staff to lean into AI and how we can utilize that. We also want to connect it into our agency and our business. So, think about how can your team adopt AI in everyday tasks, whether it's marketing, whether it's, generation, whether it's analytics. So what can actually be replaced by AI rather than replacing it with humans? and how can we arm our people to do that. I think that, we need to move away from the AI will replace me. Yes, it is going to happen in a number of roles. Yes, it's going to happen in a number of industries, but we want to always stay away from that fear. Let's get ahead of the game and a step ahead of the game to see what can be done a little bit more differently. We want to recognize the skills that people have around creativity and emotional intelligence and collaboration and all those things that we talk about that. And I recently listened to Neil Coulson. He was talking about augmented AI, and he's an AI literacy lecturer. And, how do we actually incorporate both in terms of that? So now let's talk about some practical things, because it's pretty important in terms of how you're practically going to be utilized AI into what you do. So the first thing, like anything, you want to get a baseline. You want to understand your reality in terms of where you are at today. You want to be able to audit in terms of, for example, what are the current tasks that you've got and where could AI be applied into that? So you need to look at in content creation, your analytics, your customer service, the way you might be responding to customers. I've had to do that, and about 25% already is stuff that can be replaced by AI. The other thing we need to do is we need to kind of survey the team that you've currently got in terms of what are the AI tools that they're familiar with, what is their comfort level with that, and get some sort of a rating or a base assessment around that. And we also need to define, what good looks like. For example, if your team was using AI, then how would that look like? What could we produce in terms of that? We also then need to look at the learning and capability. So running some micro mini group sessions, workshops, having some experts come in, whether it's online or face-to-face, how does this tool work? How do I apply it to my role? So making these sessions super practical and doing some mini trainings can be really great. The other is that if there are certain people feeling really comfortable with certain tools, maybe even letting them become, for example, an AI champion in your business. So they might be an AI champion on Perplexity or Claude or whatever it is that you might be using. And then not that we have them answering all the questions, but they could run those mini sessions, or you send one or two key people to some of that training to be able to do that. So what we want to do is this ongoing access to tool. People know that they can play with that. People know that they're not going to get in trouble with that. And then we want to build in some things into our workflow. So, for example, if you've got a weekly check-in already, one of the things at a weekly check-in you could ask is, what was the AI tool that you tried this week? And what was the result? So people could start sharing openly in terms of, that's interesting. I didn't know about that tool. We also need to really look at putting AI into the job description. So, for example, I want to use AI to increase my efficiency or my impact in my role by 10% or 15%. Or I want to have an AI-enabled solution on that particular problem by the end of the quarter. So how do we actually build that into that? And we also want to encourage our staff and people to document some of the time that they're saving. So they're looking at that as a positive. They're looking at the fact that they're getting other more strategic and interesting work. So we want to be able to measure that, which there's a number of apps and processes, and you might already have one in your business that you've applied. In terms of the monitoring and feedback, we want to look at some of the tasks that have been automated or been but through the experience of putting in AI, have got a lot quicker in terms of being able to use that. And we want to get some feedback from the team, but also maybe from some clients, how they finding some of the process. We want to showcase some of the stories internally, like, what they achieved. Mary did this and she can share her lessons across the business. What tools work, what didn't work. And, like if you've got 10 people around that table and 7 of them go, look, 7 of them, that tool didn't work for them. Great. Now we've got some real life data in terms of saying everybody will use that tool, that maybe for our business, that tool is, not a great tool. We also want to handle the resistance and the non-adopters. I think it's important to have that conversation one-on-one with people so they don't feel embarrassed, and we help them save face to say, hey, I know you're a bit reluctant, but this is where we're headed. Tell me about how you're feeling about that. We also want to clarify that expectation that AI is going to be part and an increasing part of roles and careers and businesses in the future. The other thing we could do is offer to also pair them perhaps with somebody that's using it with AI. They could be an observer, they could watch, they could get a sense, and listening to somebody that becomes like an internal mentor talking about how they're using AI and how it's actually helping them do that. And even if after all that support, they're still resisting, look, that person might need a role change. They might need to transition into another role in your business, or they might need to, if you've got some roles that don't require AI, but it's really important to continue to emphasize the fact that strategically we're building a staff using AI culture. And we want them to help them from shift away from fear of AI will replace me, which is a lot of the reluctance, or people think I'm too old to be trained, or I don't know if I'll be able to get trained. In terms of, look, I'm going to be a lot more valuable if I raise my game, and the organisation is going to help me get there. I don't have to do this by myself. I just wanted to also talk a little bit about, I talked about China and India, for example, being the fastest adopters of AI. They're looking at how it's transforming their healthcare and their manufacturing and services. Singapore and UAE, like there are the other hubs that are showing a lot of AI readiness, as we're calling it, and workforce engagement. I live in Australia. Our take up and adoption of AI is really slow. In fact, we're one of the slowest moving countries, and that's an issue for us. So we can't just have the big companies doing that. We've got to get our small and medium businesses also doing that. We can't bury our head in the sand anymore. So we want to actually be able to start reading about it, having some space in our diary that helps us that. And we also want to, lead a company, lead a business that recognizes and invests in some of the AI capability around that as well. So I just wanted to recap a few things. The first thing is, if you're listening to this as a leader, or if you're an employee and you're listening to this, I just want you to understand it is not about you being replaced all the time. It cannot just replace all staff, but the staff that adopt AI and they start to use AI more effectively and just start to have a play with it a bit more will replace the people that don't use it at all. And, there's a lot of research and strategies in terms of being able to turn that. And, if you've just got one action, I like the one action, the three things. I like to keep things really simple in my podcast and my work and my coaching, etc. as well. And, just say, okay, I just want one key role adopting this particular thing. How could this person start sharing it? Or I'm just going to start sharing what are the tools that people are using, not only in the workplace, but also outside. Or, I'm going to start scheduling in some 15-minute sessions to maybe map out the tool and how we could start to apply that in there. You've got to have your team involved. It's got to be a consultative process. You want to be able to kick off and you can talk at AI capability, AI readiness, talk to the team members. And some are always going to be ahead of the others, and we want to bring the others on that journey with us. We also want to, it's really important to reflect on your own AI literacy in terms of, what you do and how you will adapt to it. Who are you surrounding yourself by and with as a leader, because that's also going to have a huge impact on what you end up incorporating. Hey, thank you so much for listening to Passion Institute podcast. I really appreciate the fact that you take time to tune in and listen. Until next time, keep building your people, keep empowering them, make sure that they keep taking on AI as you do, and keep shifting the conversation towards a different future. I look forward to catching up with you next time, and thank you for tuning in.